Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Burp Suite Cheat Sheet and Tips and Tricks. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Chris Dale, SANS Certified Instructor. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Chris.
Hey, Carol, thank you very much. Just a quick peek on the web camera. Hello, everybody. Look, I can't keep my web camera on here for you all. It's also not recorded on YouTube. So I'm gonna leave my web camera off because even though I love to keep it on so you can see how we interact and what we talk about and my emotions on Burp Suite, it's a tool that I simply love. I'm gonna keep it off because I'm actually on vacation right now, and I'm sitting in a conference center where I'm not 100% sure on the bandwidth, and I just want to make this presentation go as smooth as possible without any latency issues, without any webcam issues. Like, I'm just gonna leave my webcam off for you all, okay? But now you see me. Hello, everybody. I'm here in Voss in Norway. I've been skiing all day. My legs they're killed, but I've had a great time. The sun has been shining, it's been blue, the blue sky, it's been amazing with the sun out. But now, let's talk about Burp Suite, shall we? This here is a presentation on the Burp Suite cheat sheet. It's a cheat sheet that I made because, well, frankly, I keep it as a helper for myself to remember the shortcuts, to remember how the tool interacts, and basically make me quicker and faster in utilizing Burp Suite. And also, I would like to share with you all through the cheat sheet and this webcast my tips and tricks, basically how I use the tool and what I can give back to the community in terms of like tips and tricks and how to make the most out of this tool, okay? So the cheat sheet was developed by me, Chris Dale. I'm a certified SANS instructor. I teach all over the globe, well, post COVID-19 at least, but I teach pretty much once a month. I teach the class hacking techniques, exploits, and incident response, and I also teach some other classes as well. And on my day job, I'm a consultant, a principal consultant at River Security, a company that I founded back in June 2020, mid-pandemic. I decided that why not build a new cybersecurity company, and it's going great. We're having a great time, and there's lots and lots of cool opportunities and engagements for our company to well, have fun with. So I wouldn't be able to make this cheat sheet hadn't it been for a lot of, well, contributors. So for example, Moses Frost, Moses Renegade on Twitter, he's helped me out with some tips. We have Bojan, who's helped me out with some extras in the cheat sheet. We have Hassan, who's helped me out with the cheat sheet. And hadn't it been for Randall and Carol, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today presenting on this cheat sheet. So welcome, everybody. I hope you will thank not only me for this cheat sheet, but also the contributors that helped me make this possible. Now, Burp Suite comes in two different versions. There is Burp Suite Free and Burp Suite Pro. Now, the Pro version is the de facto tool that many penetration testers focused on web applications will go to when it comes to finding vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean that the free version of Burp Suite is less worthy. It is a great tool. It's like the gateway drug into what is actually possible, though, with the enterprise or professional version of Burp Suite. So I want to quickly run through what features are missing from the free version than the Pro version. Not that I have any stakes in Burp Suite whatsoever. I don't make any money off the tool. I just simply love it, and it's a very good tool to utilize in developing or finding vulnerabilities on web applications. So one of the best features of the Pro version that you unfortunately don't have in the free version is a vulnerability scanner. The vulnerability scanner is quite good, actually. It's not horrendous. It is built on heuristics, not only signatures, and it tends to find low-hanging fruits and also some interesting, well, potential vulnerabilities that the pen tester can zoom into and focus their efforts on. So the vulnerability scanner I quite much like, and the best thing about the vulnerability scanner is also that you can extend its features via the extension API or the plugins of Burp Suite, enabling us to, well, essentially allow the vulnerability scanner to find more than what the Burp Suite developers had intended to. So I'm going to walk through some of those Burp Suite plugins later to show you how we can extend, for example, the vulnerability scanner to have more features, not just the ones that are built into the tool. Another critical feature, I would say, that is missing from the free version, unfortunately, is the fuzzer, what we call the intruder. The intruder is a fuzzing tool within the Burp Suite, which allows us to, well, replace variables with inputs that we decide. It's kind of like a scripting engine for interacting with web applications. And the free version, unfortunately, it is throttled. That means you can script and you can play around, but you will not get the full speed that the pro version has. So you'll have to wait, for example, 5 minutes for a simple little task to complete, while the pro version would finish in, say, 10 seconds. So that's a kind of a big deal, and it's kind of like a showstopper for me. If I didn't have access to the pro version, I think I would have to use a different tool, or at least complement my tool, Burp Suite, with, say, Python scripting, or better yet, OWASP Zap, which is a phenomenal engine for doing exactly this, fuzzing scripts and fuzzing applications to see how they behave when you're targeting them. The Pro version also has a lot of ease of use functions for penetration testers. For example, in the Pro version, we can create a project which allows us to save and keep sessions alive, and like make sure that a project from one day to another persists. And we can share this project between multiple members of the penetration testing team. So for example, if I need to hand over my work to someone else, they can take my Burp project file and continue the web test on my behalf. And that's a really nice feature, which unfortunately is not available in the free version either. Other things that are handy but not necessarily critical is things like, for example, content discovery, where we can look like if you heard of Deerbuster before, or GoBuster, where we are able to discover unlinked content. We can discover content that are not necessarily available for you to browse to an application, but it's still hosted somewhere in the application. Burp Suite has this handy feature where you can discover this content for us. It has the ability to find script references and comments in HTML source code and JavaScript. So for example, say I have a script that I'm curious about. I wonder which parts of the application is using this script. I can simply right click and I can get those details right away. There's also other tidbits and small things. For example, I can get a simple little report, which I can export to an HTML file, which reports on the attack surface of the application, showing me the number of GET requests, the number of POST parameters, the number of GET parameters, and basically shows me the dynamic functions of this web application, allowing pen testers to more easily scope the application. So that's it for the introduction of the tool, Burp Suite. It is for web application penetration testers, and frankly, it's quite awesome. I'm kind of like a fanboy, I would admit. Now, this cheat sheet comes in 2 pages. It's printed in a way that allows you to tri-fold the papers. So you can basically, fold the paper in 3 different layers so that it is easy to carry and easy to, well, basically open up and find what you're looking for. So that's why we have these spacers in between the cheat sheets here. If I press, that did not work. I was gonna draw on the screen here, but that apparently does not work because of resolution problems here. But basically, if you look at my cursor, there's white space between the different columns, and that means that you are able to essentially, well, fold it in a tri-fold, and that's pretty nice. Page 1 of the cheat sheet is hotkeys and navigation. Page 2 of the cheat sheet is extensions and useful tips and tricks. So here we see the full page 1 of the cheat sheet, and I'm going to go walk through many of these elements here in this presentation. You can see the white space allowing you to fold the papers quite easily. you can see that we have global hotkeys, we have navigational hotkeys, we have encoding and decoding hotkeys, we have a collaborator, which I will walk through during this presentation. We have editor hotkeys, things like we're most of the time familiar with already, but Burp Suite has some different shortcuts that we might not be familiar with. And we have tool-specific hotkeys, depending on where you are within the tool. Then on page 2 of the cheat sheet, this is where me and also the collaborators of this cheat sheet has put in and provided with the most useful extensions that we use on a daily basis, more or less. So I'm going to be talking about these more in this presentation. On page 2, we also have the REST API. Yes, there is an API of Burp Suite. You can run it in headless mode, which I will get into in this presentation. So first of all, the global hotkeys. Now, these are really, really useful because this speeds up our effectiveness or efficiency when doing testing. These global hotkeys allows us to basically quickly perform a certain action. And the ones that I use all the time is send to intruder and send to repeater. I will show you what I mean. So let me open up Burp Suite here. So I'm going to bring it over to the other screen here so you can see. So here's the Burp Suite. It's the professional edition. And I can go to the proxy. You can see that I have intercept mode on. I can click open browser. And from here, I have a beautiful little built-in browser of Burp Suite. It's based on Chromium, which allows me to browse somewhere. So I'm going to go to the Web Academy here. And I'm going to open up, that actually pops up on the other screen, but I'm going to open it up in this browser here. And when I just open up this one here, my Burp Suite immediately grabs the attention of my screen and it says, hold up, I've intercepted a request. And right now you can see what Chromium is trying to do here. It's trying to do a GET request to the host portsfigure.net. It's trying to get the following resource, web security dashboard. Now, say I want to explore this request more in detail. I want to test it. I want to do something about it. Instead of going up here to action, send to intruder, send to repeater, and so on, I can go Control R, and notice the tab up here, the repeater tab just went orange. I click it, and here I have the request, and I can send it, and I can explore what is going on. And I'm actually receiving a 302 redirect here, where they're trying to send me to a different part of the website. So they're trying to send me to web security, okay? Now, from here, I can also edit things. I can, for example, try to get dashboard. I can try to get admin, and I can send that request, and basically it says 404 not found. Now, maybe I want to fuss something here. I can press Control I and look at the intruder tab. Control I, instead of going to actions here and send to intruder, I press Control I, and now I have the request in the intruder. These are super convenient that makes the life of the pen tester much easier. I can go back from the intruder, back to the repeater. So I have another copy of this request. I can press Control R in here. I have a third request. And basically, this is quite useful. So I use these two all the time, okay? Then I have the search features of Burp Suite. Now the search is quite good. The search is quite good in the sense that I might make this request here, and I'm gonna, it says 404 not found, and I can look for something in this request. For example, I can look for this the string down here to search for something, for example, ports here, but I can also press now Control dot, and I can search for all dimensions of port by keep pressing Control dot. So Control dot, basically a punctuation mark, allows me to go through all dimensions of a simple word or phrase within the request responses here, or within the request itself on the left side here. If I want a shortcut, instead of having to click down here and type in something, I can press Control S, and that takes me to the search field in this window. But if I want to search in this window over here, I press Control S, and now I can search for something like portsfigure or whatever, viewport, for example, and it highlights whatever I'm looking at. So these things are pretty useful. if you want to go back, say you're looking for a certain string, maybe you're looking for an identifier or a keyword, and you go too far, you can use Control M to go back. And that allows us to also keep up speed and maintain that momentum while we're working with the tool. Now, other types of shortcuts here, Control A to select all. This is more or less a de facto standard in most applications. Control Z to undo, which is very useful, and Control Y to redo. That means, for example, if I'm in my application and I'm changing some certain parameter, for example, I'm replacing Mozilla 5.0 with 6.0, send this request, I can press Control Z, and I've just went back to 5.0, as you would expect. And I can go back with Control Y. Now, this might seem trivial, but when you're doing pen testing and when you're testing things with the repeater, you want to have that momentum of your testing. You want to have that speed and the flow of your testing. So being able to go quickly back and forth testing different things is very useful. So global hotkeys, this means that they work in all of the areas of the application. You can be in the intruder, you can be in the repeater, you can be in the proxy tab, and you can use these hotkeys from there, even in the target tab and so on. So that is quite useful. Now, there's also navigational hotkeys in place. And many of these navigational hotkeys I don't use on a daily basis. However, some that I do use all the time is going to the target tab, the proxy tab, and the repeater tab and intruder tab. These top four here, I very much use all the time. For example, if I'm here, I can press Control-Shift-T, and I'm here looking at a sitemap of the application. Now, if I put under intercept off here, I can see the sitemap is building out, and I can quickly go look at things. Now, if I want to go back to the repeater, I press Control-Shift-R, and look at that, I'm back at the repeater. Or maybe I have something to do with the proxy tab. I want to go to the proxy tab, Control-Shift-P. I takes me to the repeater tab, the intruder tab. If I have a request, I believe. There we go. If I have a request, I'm sent to the intruder tab, and at least these top four is quite useful for me. There's also other shortcuts like going to the project options and the dashboard tab. To be honest, the dashboard tab is much more useful than the project options, but basically these others are also useful. For example, you can flip between the different tabs using Control+ and Control equal. So you can go flip through the different tabs back and forth, and well, not having to rely so much on your mouse cursor, but instead relying on your keyboard where your focus is at most of the time. So navigational hotkeys are useful, and I really love being able to quickly go to the target tab and just see what's up within the scripts that I'm working on. The editor can also encode and decode stuff on the fly. Now, you might be familiar with Burp already, and you know that we have the decoder tab up here, where we can type in, for example, say hello world, and we can encode this in, for example, URL. We can encode it as HTML. If I had any special characters here, we would see them being replaced, base64, and so on. Now, the thing is, a request, say, for example, within the repeater tab here, can also be, well, decoded and encoded on the fly without us having to go to the repeater or to the decoder, excuse me. So I want to show you an example. Say, for example, I have a request where I have some get parameters. Maybe in this request here, I have some, say, up here, I have get or maybe do equals, and then I have a URL encoded string. Now, this URL encoded string, what most of us would be doing is we will put this into the decoder tab. We don't have to. We can press Control-Shift-U, and it is automatically decoded for us. So we can see live what is going on within a URL encoded string. I can press Control-U and encode it again, but keep in mind the encoding will only encode the characters that are actually of significance for URL encoding. So it won't encode the entire string. This is extremely useful when, for example, writing an SQL injection. Say, for example, do tick or tick equals tick 1 equals 1, then semicolon dash dash. I can now highlight this string. I can press Control U, and it encodes this, well, encodes this parameter as how my browser would do it. Okay, so this is a life changer for a lot of us. Say we had some base64 encoded content within our application. Maybe we had, for example, some header, or maybe something in the response where we had some base64 encoded content. Now, the inline editor also supports decoding base64. So, for example, I can do Control-Shift-B, and it's suddenly decoded this base64 parameter for me. I can press Control-B, and it encodes it back in for me. It is incredibly convenient when working quickly through applications, trying to figure out what is going on. And this also works within the application responses. So I can highlight some response here, and I can press Control-Shift and decode something, or just Control and encode something. And that's the thing with this cheat sheet. The cheat sheet allows me to, well, press Control and a shortcut to encode something, or I can press Control-Shift to undo something, like remove encoding. So you press Control-Shift to remove something, you press Control to add something. We can also, well, encode HTML entities, which is quite useful. Say, for example, we are testing for cross-site scripting. And within cross-site scripting, we might have to encode some specific parameters of the website. Maybe we want to input, say, some HTML content, but we need to encode the HTML entities to ensure that we know that we're not breaking something of the application, or maybe the application is already encoding for us and we want to decode. So what we can do now is press Control-Shift-H for HTML entities, Control-Shift-H, and just like that, you can see script type, JavaScript, source is malware.com, malware.js. I don't recommend that you visit this URL. I have no clue what is behind it, okay? But if I want to encode it again, guess what? Control-Shift-H decodes, Control-H encodes it. It is really that simple. And this is, for pen testers, a very convenient function, Now, there's also tool-specific hotkeys. For example, within the repeater, I cannot tell you how many times I've sat there watching a pen tester work with a vulnerability, and they're typing in their stuff here. They're putting in whatever attack they want to put in, like hello world, whatever. Like if I could type here at least, they would put in some attack in here. They put in hello, for example, and then they will bring their mouse up, so they will lose focus off the keyboard. They'll bring their mouse up here to send. But you don't have to do this. You can press Control-Space, and you will repeat as many times as you want. Now, for me, this is like, hallelujah, this is amazing. I love this. But if you don't know about it, you're gonna keep using your mouse, and you're gonna lose valuable time having to remove your fingers from the keyboard, moving that mouse up to the send request. There's also, from the proxy tab, you can turn interception on and off with the Control-T, so T for Tango, or you can forward a specific request with Control-F. Let me show you, for example, here, if I go to my Burp suite here again, if I go to that proxy tab here, intercept, I press intercept is on, or I press Control-T. You can see I can flip that shortcut on and off. So intercept is on right now. Let me visit a website, like, for example, say something ridiculous like CNN.com, which is like 120 different requests, just visiting this one request. So if I go to CNN.com, this one request here, I can now press Control-F to forward, and then I have another request, which is a redirect to HTTPS, I believe. I have another request, another request, another request, and as CNN.com keeps loading in my browser now, you will see more than 120 different requests to all kinds of different assets, ad networks, images, JavaScript, all kinds of, well, I would call it junk, but there's just a ton of stuff to be loaded off this one website. So I might want to just forward all of these. I press Control-T, and now my queue is gone, and my browser is finished loading. So here we see the browser is loaded, finished up. So those are quite useful. Now, within the repeater and the intruder, we have a super convenient feature which allows us to rename tabs. So here, for example, I can select tab number 1, and I can go say, for example, double click up here. Notice that the number 1 was now highlighted. I can press backspace, and I can say, for example, admin. And then I have this other request here where I can say, for example, header testing. And then I have a third request where I can say, for example, I want to say do equals, for example. And I can add names for my tabs. So once you're doing a pen test, you might notice that your repeater tabs are growing proportionally. You might have 100 repeater tabs open in a single test. And with this simple, clever feature, you can name those tabs with something that makes sense. Now here's the catch. The repeater tab will persist the names of the tabs. So when I leave this project, if I save this project and I leave it, I open it back up, my repeater tabs, excuse me, have persisted. So I will see these same tabs here as I did when I left the project. This does not work with the intruder tab, unfortunately. So at least not to my knowledge. Maybe they fixed it in the latest patch. I don't know, but I don't think so. So for example, here I renamed this one here. Now the next time I open up my project, all of the intruder tabs will actually be gone. They do not persist, unfortunately. So that's kind of like a shame. I wish it wasn't like that. Okay. Maybe someone from Burp is listening and they will implement a fix for this. But yeah, super convenient features, and that's why we put them in the cheat sheet. Within Burp Suite, we also have something called the Burp Collaborator. This is a professional feature, but what the Burp Collaborator is, it's essentially a way for the penetration tester to listen for callbacks. A callback, meaning some kind of external service interaction from the web application. So maybe you are able to force a web application to make a DNS lookup. Maybe you can force a web application to send an SMTP, like an email, or make an outbound HTTP or HTTPS request. The Burp Collaborator is designed to, well, allow you to know this is happening. And the Burp Collaborator is also very strongly connected with the vulnerability scanner of Burp Suite. So for example, I want to show you something. So if I bring up Burp Suite here, I can go to Burp up here. I can go to Burp Collaborator client, and I can say create myself. I want to create 10 different domains that are all, well, that are all listening for any types of callbacks. Let me bring up Notepad there. My shortcuts here are messing up. There we go. So I'm going to paste in here. I now have 10 unique links that are for my session within Burp Suite. And what Burp Suite is currently doing, and the collaborator is currently doing, is that if any of these links here, if I use this within my payloads, I'll show you how soon. If I use any of these domains in my payloads, if any of them get any type of callback, for example, if I do WSL dig and I look up this domain, the collaborator will know that this happened. So I click pull now instead of waiting. You will see that I just had a connection. Someone just resolved this domain, allowing me to pick up on the fact that the web application or something, maybe it's a sysadmin or a developer looking through logs, but something just resolved this domain with a unique identifier pertaining to my session within the collaborator here. And I can make as many of these as I would like to. This is a super handy feature that, well, honestly, we use it all the time. I will show you how to make better use of the collaborator soon, okay? Because there are ways to make the collaborator easier to use and more friendly in terms of using it in line with inside of your testing and so on. All right, so collaborator, you gotta check it out. If you haven't tried it already, it's about time. The collaborator also allows us to exfiltrate data in some cases. Say you're working on an SQL injection case or a server-side request forgery case or something interesting that allows the back-end application to perform requests for your behalf. Well, you can send data to the collaborator and simply listen and see what you're getting back, and even allow you to read off the data that you're exfiltrating from the application. Overall, this is a top tool that I recommend all testers to use within their web application testing. All right, so that's the collaborator. Now, the cheat sheet also contains a lot of different extensions that you can use. Many of them are super useful. For example, the param miner. The param miner is something that you have to take a look at, because what it tries to do is that it tries to find what we call unlinked parameters. It tries to find, well, input to a script or the application that you are not already aware of. Say, for example, in my request up here, in the repeater tab, you remember me doing the little do equals hello? Well, what if do actually existed? Or what if there's some little admin? What if I could do it like this? Admin equals true or 1. Or maybe I could do check user equals false. There are so many potential parameters a script can provide which you might not be aware of. And what param miner tries to do for you is to guess these get parameters, guess cookie parameters, guess headers, or guess everything. Okay, so we can basically start to guess what the application might be able to do for us. And based on looking at the different results from the responses, if we have a different result, the tool param miner will in the dashboard list to us if there was any interesting parameters it was able to find. Now, you might think that this takes a lot of time, and typically param miner would take a lot of time, but the developer, James Kettle, has developed an algorithm that allows you to test a lot of different parameters simultaneously. So you're not just testing one parameter at a time, you're actually testing 10, 20, 30, as many as you can fit into the header and the get parameters and so on. You're testing all of those at the same time, and if any of those parameters provide a different result, the tool, param miner, extension that is, will allow you to essentially reduce which one of those 10, 20, 30 different parameters was causing that difference in results of the web application. So param miner, oh, it's just lovely. I use this all the time. We also have /powered scanner, which is another plugin developed by James Kettle. He's also developer of the param miner. James Kettle is one of the employees at Burp Suite. I believe he's the chief, or at least the top developer of the active scanner, the vulnerability scanner of Burp Suite. And the /power scanner provides some interesting experimental features for the active scanner, that is the vulnerability scanner. The /power scanner allows the developer to, not the developer, the pen tester, to have an automatic way of trying all kinds of interesting inputs and looking in the results to see if there's any inputs that are transformed. Say, for example, a backslash is transformed into a double backslash, or curly brackets are removed or replaced with something else. The /power scanner allows us to find all these potentially very interesting things that a vulnerability scanner would have a hard time uncovering what might have vulnerabilities in it, but you as a pen tester, you might be able to conclude if these transformations, if these interesting data inputs are actually something that you can exploit for something good. So /power scanner, while it will often give you a lot of false positives, it allows the pen tester to have a better understanding of the application and explore all the different avenues of attack within the application itself. A must-have extension, if you ask me. Now, the software vulnerability scanner is also quite useful. The software vulnerability scanner is simply a kind of naive tool. It's very naive in the way that it just looks for version numbers. If it sees IIS version 8.5, it will take that IIS version number and it will submit it to vulners.com and get a list of known vulnerabilities for that specific version number. And it's a way to, well, safeguard the pen tester that you're not missing anything obvious in the sense of version numbers or something that you should have caught, something that you should have known about. So it is quite good. Keep in mind that there are false positives, and because of the naive way of checking, not all of the vulnerabilities that you will find with this extension will actually be exploitable. Now, other extensions are, for example, the HTTP request smuggler. This extension basically tries to exploit and discover vulnerabilities that reside within the HTTP protocol, where you're able to piggyback other HTTP requests within one request. Because of how say a web application firewall or how a proxy or some kind of middleware might change or misinterpret different pieces of the headers of the HTTP program, and it might misinterpret them differently or interpret them differently than what the actual application is doing, HTTP request smuggling becomes something that we need to be concerned about. Now, I'm not going to go over the technology or the vulnerability itself. What I want to tell you is that the HTTP request smuggler allows you to find these vulnerabilities, at least let you explore them and see if you're capable of, well, using them for something mischievous. So you can tell your customer that, look, this is actually a problem. This extension here has saved me a lot of different times. One time I had a case where I had a huge web application where we had the ability to smuggle in a cross-site scripting attack so that the cross-site scripting attack would persist inside of the proxy layer of the backend, allowing us to attack more than 10,000 users an hour every single hour, using simply a HTTP request smuggling attack. You don't want to miss these. You want to make sure that your tool are able to give you the information that you need to explore this family of vulnerabilities. Now, we also have other extensions to the vulnerability scanner. For example, ActiveScan++. This is a must-have as well, if you ask me, because I think within the Burp Suite team, they want to have a lot of like high quality. They have quality assurance of the active scanner. That is the vulnerability scanner again, okay? The active scanner, they want to make sure that it works with the least amount of false positives, that the results that you get are actionable, and so on, so on, so. But the Active Scanner++ has more experimental features. It allows you to find all kinds of different interesting things that might not lead to a vulnerability, but gives you, as the pen tester, the ability to explore. It gives you the drive and the motivation and the little nugget of information that you need to have to explore what the application is doing. And Active Scanner++ looks for all kinds of vulnerabilities like XML input handling, host header attacks, and a ton of other things. So you gotta check it out. Same thing with retire.js. Retire.js is more like the vulners.com extension that we cover here, the software vulnerability scanner. Retire.js simply reports on outdated JavaScript, and it will link to you which CVE is covered in the vulnerability of the outdated JavaScript. And this allows you to figure out if the application is actually vulnerable to something, say, for example, a cross-site scripting, based on the functions that the application is using, rather than you just reporting on, say, hey, outdated JavaScript, sure, patch this. But in most cases, or so I would say in many cases, the vulnerabilities in JavaScript might not pertain to this actual web application. Retire.js allows me as the pen tester to take an outdated JavaScript, click the CVE links, and figure out what does this CVE actually report on? What is actually the vulnerability? And then I can ask myself, is this application vulnerable to this specific, does this application actually use this specific function call, for example? Is it actually vulnerable or not? So retire.js makes my life easier in that it reports and links up the CVEs. Pretty useful. There's also extensions that allows us to explore authentication and authorization errors and mistakes and misconfigurations and so on. Today, a lot of applications are using the security authentication markup language, SAML. SAML is something that is used more and more, and SAML Radar allows us to intercept SAML messages, automatically decode them. So it takes all the basics before and decode it for us It validates the certificates and also allows us to, well, inspect the certificates, replace the certificates with our own, remove certificates, and check for a bunch of different vulnerability types within SAML. Sometimes developers make shortcuts. They haven't figured out how to properly verify the certificate chains, for example, or they haven't properly figured out how to verify a signature. And SAML Radar allows us to do this easily within Burp Suite, instead of you having to manually open up the SAML requests, decode them, and so on. I have SAML Radar up here somewhere. Here you see SAML Radar certificates. So if I have a SAML request now, I could right-click that SAML request or the response. I could put it into SAML Radar here, and I could inspect the SAML certificates and what kind of attribute this gives me, and I can start to replace parts of the certificates easily. And that's the keyword, easily. It allows me to explore to see if developers have made mistakes, or maybe there's some misconfiguration somewhere in the application, and so on. We also have JSON Web Tokens, which is a convenient extension, allows us to quickly manipulate JSON Web Tokens on the fly to automate common attacks, to decode them so we can see what they contain. Say, for example, here, I open up my JSON Web Tokens tab here. I can paste in JWT here, a JSON Web Token, or I can send it from a request. So I can right-click a request and send it to this extension, and I can see what it contains. Maybe I'll open up, say, JWT IO, and I'll open up a JSON Web Token. So here we have JWT IO, and I have a token here. Say I want to export this token now within Burp Suite. This extension allows me to explore it. So paste it in, and now you can see that I have a way to explore it. I can also enter a key, so I can try to overwrite and check to see if the signature is matching and so on. It's quite useful. Authorize is also another very convenient feature. So as you've noticed in this Burp Suite cheat sheet, we are trying to give you things that makes your life easier, things that should be in your tool arsenal when you're using Burp Suite, and Authorize is one of those features. Authorize will allow you to explore an application via different authentication users and roles. So for example, I can explore an application via an authenticated role, maybe an administrator user. And then within Authorize, I can load in a session identifier for a non-privileged user, or an unauthorized user, or maybe a low privileged user. And what Authorize allows me to do is that it allows me to detect if any of the high privilege scripts and functionality is accessible from any of the other sessions that I want to explore the application with. Because as you know, a web application is not secure if you don't test it with credentials. You want to test not just the external facade of the web application, you also want to log into the web application, simulating a credential being lost or stolen, maybe credential stuffing and so on, or users misbehaving and so on. But from a logged in perspective, we want to test, is there any mistakes in how the application checks for flaws, checks for authorization, and this extension here automates that process. It can be a daunting experience looking into Authorize, but it's simple when you get started. So you want to load in the cookies. You want to make sure that you add a way for Authorize to check to whether or not this request that it's trying to make was validated or not. But once you get into how Authorize works, it is quite easy peasy. So Authorize, just another tool that you should have in your arsenal. Other extensions include Logger++. Now, Logger++, it's just a tool that you need to have. It should have been a feature built into Burp Suite, and I'm sure it will be soon, because Logger++ allows us to gain visibility in what is happening within all the different tabs, within the vulnerability scanner, and what's happening behind the scenes of this tool. So here you can see within Logger++, I like to sort it from the latest request here, and I like to just inspect Logger++ when my other tools are running. So I can see that the proxy tab here has, for example, requested a bunch of different things. I can go to options and I can say, I don't want to see the proxy tab. I want to just see requests that are sent by, let's go to save here. If you can scroll, where is the save button? All right. I thought it would auto-save, but it doesn't matter. But I can now inspect basically what my different tools are doing. And you can see here, the repeater tab is our 4 requests from the repeater tool that we used earlier. We can see the results, we can see the content lengths, and it's quite useful for many reasons, because when you're testing, you're probably not just doing one thing at the same time. You're probably not just doing one thing, you're probably doing multiple things at the same time. And what you can do then is you can inspect, for example, here, you can sort from the greatest number to the lowest number, and you can see, is there any 500 error messages that you need to inspect? 500 meaning the server errored. There might be a vulnerability when you have a 500 server error happening. So I can quickly sort by this status code here, and I can see anything that I should explore, maybe something the vulnerability scanner didn't find that I need to explore manually, maybe something my intruder tool and the extension that created. I can very easily find those. And also another super useful thing is the RTT, the round trip time here. I want to make sure that my round trip times, the RTT, is as low as possible. Okay, I want to see low numbers in this column here, because if I start seeing numbers like the ones up top here, if my tool will behave. So it's a bit laggy here, but I think it's working now. So here you see that basically this request here took 23 seconds. Now, say for example, I was doing some fuzzing activities. Maybe I'm doing a vulnerability scan and I'm fuzzing different portions of the web application. If I start seeing the round trip time increasing dramatically, that might tell me that I'm breaking the application. I'm causing a denial of service attack. So I'm always paying attention to the RTT to make sure that the amount of requests that I'm sending, the number of simultaneously requests are not breaking the application. And again, I'm sorting on the status code to make sure that I'm not losing any valuable information. Now, when I'm done, every time I've reviewed this Logger++ tab here, I will go to options and I will click clear the logs here, clear the logs. Okay, so that basically clears out all the logs, and then I'll run some attacks, I'll run some scans, and I'll revisit this tab just to see, are things behaving like I expect them to. We also have the Turbo Intruder. The Turbo Intruder is a Python scripting tool within Burp Suite. It allows us to script via Python to make all kinds of different requests. And it also has some built-in convenient functions. For example, we have a function that allows us to differentiate between interesting requests and responses versus non-interesting requests and responses. And we can fuzz via Python, which is very useful in many cases where you can't just rely on the intruder, where you need to make more interesting attacks that involve programming something and making the application, well, react to what you have developed. And the Turbo Intruder allows us to do this. It also allows us to do what we call HTTP pipelining, allows us to significantly increase the performance and speed of our HTTP requests. Now, I'm not going to go into this topic in this talk. However, check out the billion HTTP request attack, and it will take you through basically a little tutorial on how to use Turbo Intruder and how you can significantly speed up your web developer attack or web penetration testing attacks via the Turbo Intruder. It also allows us to do things like race condition attacks and abuse, for example, web cards and shopping functionality by trying to test for race conditions. It is overall a super convenient tool that is something that you really need to look into if you're going to cover the entire scope of applications and understand really what they're all about. Turbo Intruder, check it out. There's also a GitHub repository, by the way. So Turbo, let's Google that quickly here. Let's go here. Control L, Turbo, Intruder, GitHub, you will see that there's a bunch of example scripts that will get you started, because you don't want to start from scratch. You want to see some examples on how to start the engine, how to start HTTP pipelining, how to use the heuristic that detects interesting events from non-interesting events, and so on. And that's all within the examples folder here, where you can check out contributing scripts from all kinds of different people, and you can check how you can, for example, do a race condition test, how you can do output things to a file, how you can test multiple host headers, and so on. Overall, something that every Burp Suite user should know about. Now, the tabulator is what I talked about when I said, look, the Burp collaborator can be used easier. So let me show you here. The tabulator is installed in my, so I've added it as an extension. You can see it up here, okay? Now, what the tabulator allows me to do is, while, for example, I am within the repeater tab, the intruder tab, somewhere within Burp Suite, what the tabulator allows me to do is say something like this. Maybe here in the host header, I will right-click this, and I will go to tabulator, and I will say insert collaborator payload. Now, this automatically now causes me to have a collaborator unique URL that is actively listening within the tabulator tool. So if I click send now, what we are monitoring is to see, is there any interaction with this domain that I inputted into the repeater? I can click pull now, and there was none, but let's go for an example here. Let's take this URL that we put in. Unfortunately, we didn't have an actual vulnerability within the Burp Suite website, but if I now do WSL dig, and I look for this domain, I just caused a DNS request to this unique domain. And the tabulator now, if I wait for a minute, it will highlight and say, someone just made a request for us. And I click pull now, and you can see that I just received an input here. And that is incredibly useful, because what you will do in many cases is that you will launch all kinds of different attacks with different Burp collaborators, and you don't want to have that window open all the time with the Burp collaborators. You want to have an easy way to put them into your tools, and that's what the Burp collaborator, the tabulator does for you. I can also do something like this. I can click insert tabulator here. I can insert collaborator placeholder. And that inserts a little variable here, collab please. Now, every time I click send, I will get a new Burp Suite collaborator. So right now you won't see that reply here, but every send request here, I will get a new Burp collaborator, and all of them are now being monitored within the tabulator tab. I might be able to see this from the repeater tab here. If I go to repeater, you can the logger plus, I click the repeater request here. You can see the host header down here. You can see how it changes from each request. And that is quite useful. Again, a tool, an extension to Burp Suite that gives us a lot of convenience. And maybe someday in the future, we will have these built into Burp Suite. Now, as I said, Burp Suite in the beginning, Burp Suite also has an API. And the API is something that you would typically use when you run Burp Suite in headless mode. Headless? Yes. Headless means without a GUI, without a graphical user interface. For example, you can automate vulnerability scanning with Burp Suite. You can run Burp Suite. It's a simple a jar application. You can run it like this here, path to your burp.jar file, and you can basically tell it to scan a URL, and you can read off the status of that scan, and you can also get a list of issues with it that scan found. Now, the scan results returns to you, for example, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, anything that you will see within the dashboard of Burp Suite. So from the API, you will get this list over here. But the beautiful thing is also you will get the definition itself. So you will get the issue description and so on. So you can very easily build a little application that performs vulnerability scanning for you using Burp Suite. So overall, a handy dandy feature that allows you to automate things, perhaps build it into your CI, the continuous integration, continuous development process of your organization. Burp Suite, as you saw me use, has a built-in browser. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that you don't have to configure your browser like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, whatever you're using. You don't have to configure that browser to use Burp Suite. Instead, you can simply go to the proxy tab and you can use a built-in browser of Burp Suite that is pre-configured with SSL TLS certificates that just simply works. So anything that I browse from this window here will be automatically loaded through the proxy. And that's quite useful. You don't have to think about certificates, installing them into Firefox, Chrome, whatever. It is quite useful. Right. There's also a lot of other things that I really wanted to talk about in this presentation, but I don't have time and I don't have space in the cheat sheet to cover all of them. Some of the things that I really wanted to talk about, though, is, for example, the go to search option. So within, say, the repeater, if I had some cool requests here, maybe I'll do, sure, this request here. Maybe I want to look for something specific down here. We had the view or the port thing, right? Maybe we'll look for something further down here. Maybe we'll look for button orange small. This keyword here might have some impact to me, and I want to know if this ever changes. What I can do is I can click this little wheel or the cog down here, and I can click auto scroll to match when text changes. So if I now click send, notice that my window on the right side automatically scrolled to this place. So say I'm experimenting with my different parameters, I'm doing different parameters and so on, and whoa, HTTP, and I want to automatically check to see if the results contain some variations or any differences and so on. So every time this checkbox is ticked, I will automatically scroll to where my search word is. Right now, I'm at the top of the request because I unchecked the button. If I click auto scroll, and it will automatically scroll to what I'm looking for. Very useful when doing penetration testing. We also have rename tabs. I covered that. Chaining proxies can be quite useful. So sometimes I might use a very specific VPN, or I need to use something very specific to a client, something that might be loaded within, say, a VM, for example. What I can do then is I can chain multiple proxies together. So maybe from within this tool here, I can go to project options here. I can go, say, upstream proxy, and I can point this to another proxy that is, say, running Burp Suite or whatever tool that I need to have. So here I can put in, for example, the IP address of Burp Suite. Maybe I have a Burp Suite Professional running on a different host where Burp Suite Free is running within a VM. I can simply put in a star here, put in proxy host, put in port 8080, and basically now all my new requests will be sent to this IP address for all destinations on this port here. If you want to chain Burp Suites together, you need to make sure that your proxy options allow any incoming connections. Right now, my Burp Suite proxy only allows connections coming in from 127.0.0.1. I would edit this and I would say listen on all interfaces or a specific address from my list of interfaces here. Now this is quite useful, and hopefully you're able to figure out some places where you would use this in your testing, but I use it typically from within a VM to chain Burp Suite Free to my Burp Suite Professional to have that tool do the testing for me. We can sequence values with the sequencer tab. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to cover that in the cheat sheet, but within the sequencer, I'm able to input variables from my tools. So I can say, for example, send to sequencer here, and I can take, say, the session identifier, and what the sequencer will start to do is that it will start to capture tons of different, well, values of that token that you're looking for. In this case, though, I'm just doing a little sample here on the session identifier, and for each request my sequencer did now, it just simply made a new request with a new session identifier for each request, and it will try to give us information whether or not the session identifier is random, whether or not there's any bits inside of the session identifier that is not random. It gives you a bit of perspective on seemingly random values that might not be random after all. I do believe I have some videos on YouTube where I'm using the sequencer to check those out. Also, configuring the scans. You should not, well, most likely not be running the vulnerability scanner in the default options mode. You want to make sure that when you do testing, you configure it to be thorough and to give you the most amount of false positives. That is, you don't want to miss any false negatives. You want to be able to find the most vulnerabilities as possible. You don't necessarily care if the tool is quick or not. You probably have time. So configure your scans to be very thorough and to always report, even if the tool believes it's a false positives. You, as a pen tester, want to ensure that it's not a false positive. Never trust automation or heuristics. Also, discovering content is quite beautiful, and finding references and comments. We're going to leave that for another presentation. But check those out if you have the pro version. Now, I wouldn't want to have this talk here today without having a huge shout out to the Web Academy that Portswigger has announced or they have made for us. After Portswigger Web Academy, what they have given the community for free is a bunch of useful and very clever labs to allow you to practice web application security. So check out the Web Academy. It is basically, if you ever read the book, the Web Applications Hackers Handbook, it is that plus a lot more. So they're not creating the third edition of the Web Application Hackers Handbook. Instead, they have decided to leave books behind and move to a web format where they're publishing everything for free that they know of, allowing you to practice vulnerabilities and have fun doing web application penetration testing. Now, I can't believe how fast 1 hour went. I've had so much fun presenting this to you all. I hope you liked it. Here's my details. You're welcome to email me. You can follow me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can check out my company if you want to. But basically, that's my presentation, and I really hope that the cheat sheet provides you some value. Now, there might be questions, so I'm going to hand it over to Carol to bring those questions my way.
All right, Chris, yes, I see one question. It says, how to make less noisy build in web browser?
How to make less, one more time, sorry, Carol.
They said, how to make less noisy build in web browser. And if you're not sure exactly what they mean, we can have them reach out to you directly.
Yeah, ping me on Twitter. I did realize that my Twitter handle is not on this slide. Let me just quickly bring that on here. Let's see. I'm not sure. Noisy build. I think I know what you mean. Actually, I love that question. If you mean what I think you mean. So on Twitter, it's Chris A. Dale. So yeah. So I think what you're saying is that you want to have the browser that you're testing with create less noise when testing, because by default, your browsers, they will create tons of noise. Here's like, if I go to my dashboard here, there's all kinds of requests here that have been made by my browser looking for updates, looking for so and so and so and so. Now, I had a presentation on YouTube. I believe it's on the SANS pen testing YouTube, but I did a presentation on this. I can't remember when, but it's quite a while ago, where I showed how to configure your browser to have less noise. Nowadays, though, someone else has taken what I made, or whatever, maybe not what I made, and just made it themselves. There's a profile, browser profile for penetration, for web application penetration testing. So what you can do is you can load in a little JavaScript that sets a bunch of different options to make sure that your browser does not make all those unnecessary requests for captive web portals and so on. Unfortunately, I'm not able to find it right now, but if you do ping me on Twitter or on LinkedIn, I will look for it for you, or I will look for my presentation where I'm pretty sure that I can find it. What it revolves around is going in here, going to Chrome settings here, or actually it's the Chrome, the advanced settings, Chrome Advanced Settings, and it basically involves you flipping a bunch of different settings so that you turn off all that noise. So inside of the Advanced Settings, isn't it like I can't remember what the shortcut was, but you basically type in a little keyword up here, like about Chrome, whatever, and it will show up different things here. I can't remember which one is right now. And you can automate this process by creating a little JavaScript that sets all the different things for you. Great question. But ping me and I will try to look for it for you.
All right, well, that's all we have. Thank you so much, Chris, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Cheers.